A former Russian Prime Minister, Mikhail Kazyanov, who served under Russian President Vladimir Putin, says Putin is beginning to realize that he's going to lose the war in Ukraine. To discuss this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, joining us once again from Los Angeles. Now, Lisa, it appears as though Putin's confidence is somewhat shaken. Perhaps maybe he underestimated the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian people.
Right. So from the beginning of this conflict, we have been trying to assess Putin's mindset. That is really the mystery here as to what is he thinking and why has this taken so long. So in terms of strategy, we question the military, the Russian military. Why haven't they been able to, finish the job and finish it quickly? In terms of military might, in terms of military technology, in terms of advancement and training, the Russians far, outweigh what the capability of the Ukrainians. So yes, we can say perhaps the Ukrainians were given supplies by the international community and they had more might than Russia may have assumed, but it shouldn't have taken this long. There shouldn't have been this many setbacks. So the question still is, what is the mindset of Putin and what is he thinking now? Now, because we have also said Putin is not one to back down or surrender. The analysts always say that the thing he needs or what the international community has to come up with is an off-ramp. How will he back down? What will make him back down? And when will it happen? Now, as we discuss all of this, the weeks and months have gone by and we have more tragedies. We have, millions of refugees on the run, flooding Europe and elsewhere, and we still don't have an off-ramp. So now we are wondering whether he will just play the clock out because he does not have an off ramp and he does not have a plan forward. So if there is attrition in the Russian army, if he has in fact lost a third of his army, as reports indicate, if he does not have a plan forward, if in fact he does not want to escalate and turn this into World War III with nuclear weapons, then he may just play this out. And this is why we're seeing things unfold the way that they are.
There were also reports, Lisa, that possibly Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Russian President Vladimir Putin would sit down and maybe talk about the potential of Ukraine giving up some more of its land as a compromise, perhaps. What are you hearing? What's the latest?
Yeah, well, from the beginning of this conflict, the Ukrainian president was open to sitting down to talks. Of course, he did not want to give up land. He did not want those territories to be taken over. But that is something that is, it almost has to be conceded at this point because the Russians have the upper hand, particularly in those areas. And you do have Ukrainians who want to be under the Russian flag in those areas as well. So when they come out and say, okay, we're in, then it makes it more difficult for the Ukrainians to hold on to those territories. Look, the Ukrainian president and the Ukrainians want this to be over. So, the Ukrainian president is willing to make some concessions. He said he's willing to sit down. I mean, months ago, we saw Putin put out a list of qualifying, concessions that he would want, conditions that must be met in order for him to surrender. And they were easy and they would be able to be met. Now, he said this to Erdogan, the Turkish leader, and now we're wondering, well, did he really mean that? Because you can't really believe anything he says. Or did the markers move? Did he move the goalpost to a point to say, well, if the Ukrainians so easily said yes to the list of conditions I provided, well, maybe I can get more out of this. So, it's very difficult to get into the mindset of Putin. It's very difficult to see where this will go. But yes, Zelensky was willing to, he's called upon the international community to really put this to an end as soon as possible. He rolled up his sleeves. He didn't go anywhere. He wanted to be brave. He wanted to hold on to Ukraine as best as possible. He does not want to see Ukraine taken off the map. He does not want to see Ukraine just become, another province of Russia. So he's willing to give up what it takes to remain a sovereign country, even if it means conceding those areas.
Now, there are reports, Lisa, that Russian troops are withdrawing from Kharkiv after bombarding it for weeks as Kyiv and Moscow's forces engaged in a real grinding battle for Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland.
Yes. And this is, again, so we wonder what's going on, right? Are the Russians met with such force that it's not worth it for them to move on forward? Are they setting their sights on farther east to move move east and not stay in one place, particularly because of the reports that so many Russian troops have been lost in this conflict. There's a lot of questions as to how are things going. Of course, if you ask the Russians, it's going according to plan and it's going wonderfully, but it doesn't seem that way. And of course, the timeline wouldn't indicate that either. It looks like the Ukrainians are putting up a fight, particularly when they know the area, they have a certain level of weaponry, and they're able to outsmart the Russians to a certain extent because they have those certain advantages. So, with the reports like the one you just mentioned, is with withdrawing and moving east, it looks like they're picking and choosing their battles, literally and figuratively speaking. So, again, I hate to say time will tell. It's a cliche, but in this case, time has really shown us that the Russians are not capable of carrying this out, especially as smoothly or as quickly as they first anticipated.
Now, we keep hearing rumors and reports that Vladimir Putin is sick. The latest is from a former British spy, Christopher Steele, who says the Russian president has a serious illness, and a Russian oligarch says Putin has blood cancer.
Yes, and we've seen these reports before. They're resurfacing today, and we're wondering if it's true. And if it's true, well, it goes and plays into the mystery about Putin and what he's thinking. So if Putin will have a long legacy, he wouldn't want this to be a failure, right? So he would escalate, or he would take this to a place where he would come out to be the victor. Now, if he is in fact dying, well, if he's hit a dead end, no pun intended, then he can really say, I'm going to play out the clock because I'm sick anyway, and this is not something I want to use my energy on. Now, the question then becomes, when did he find out about this illness? Did he go into Ukraine thinking this is my last shot, let this be my legacy? Or did this come up, suddenly? I know that's a cancer that may move more quickly. It's really all speculation at this point. I mean, those are two good sources. I have also heard the rumors, and we've heard them for a while now. The fact that they're recirculating and resurfacing, we don't know if there is additional evidence to suggest that he is sick and that this is, again, the end of his life, or if it's just, again, speculation because of the way that he is maneuvering and operating this conflict currently.
You remember we also had those reports about North Korea's Kim Jong-un, so we'll see how this plays out. Lisa, the first trial resulting from special counsel John Durham's investigation into the origins of the discredited Trump-Russia collusion narrative opened today. Hillary Clinton's campaign lawyer, Michael Sussman, faces justice for allegedly lying to the FBI.
This is an awful story, and it really is. It taints the U.S. reputation, or what's left of it right now. It's crazy to think that a potential candidate for president would be able to manipulate the FBI, the media, more importantly, the media, because they just completely took on a different narrative and believing things that weren't true. And now, I mean, some justice, but it's very difficult to correct narratives like this. It's very difficult to change people's minds and perceptions. And perhaps it's too late, but I know that a lot of people are watching this and are happy that some justice is being brought up about. But then it also really points to and underscores the fact that this could have happened. I mean, the potential for the FBI and the media to be in cahoots with one candidate, to lie, to cheat, to manipulate, and to completely try to smear another campaign. And the fact that it could happen again, just like our voting, apparatuses here, and the fact that it could happen again and it could happen again. So it really brings about more distrust in the American system, the American media, the American elections, all of it. And it's not a good day. Even though I know a lot of people are saying justice has brought about a lot of truths that are very painful to accept are also being brought about.
Lisa, several U.S. congressional representatives sent a letter to Twitter's newest potential owner, Tesla's Elon Musk, to ensure that the social media company does not become a platform for terrorists. Tell me more about that.
Yes, they make a wonderful argument. This is spearheaded by Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, out of New York. She makes a great point, and she writes a letter to Elon Musk saying, should you purchase Twitter, I hope the first thing that you do is clear out these terrorists that are using the U.S.-owned platform to launch threats against the U.S. and our allies. And the point that she makes is that legally, this is something that should not stand. If we are sanctioning these individuals, and more specifically, it's the Iranian regime and the leaders there, if we are sanctioning them as terrorists, then they should not be able to threaten the United States and others using a U.S. platform, because the law says that they cannot derive benefit from any U.S. products. Well, if it's U.S. owned social media platform, it's a U.S. product, and therefore these terrorists should not be deriving benefit. It's a long time coming. I mean, if Twitter's owners previously were able to get rid of Donald Trump and many other conservatives just because of the way that they think and they don't agree with them, why have these terrorists been able to be on the platform and to launch, again, threats and all sorts of propaganda that is very, very violent and goes against U.S. law? Let's get them off. And I think Elon Musk will adhere to this. As much as he wants freedom of speech, I don't think he will allow terrorists to have their heyday on a U.S. platform.
Let's turn our attention now to Iran, Lisa. Protesters in Iran poured into the streets recently over huge inflationary pressures. We think we have it bad here in North America. Many Iranians can no longer even afford the price for bread. And some of these clashes with the regime resulted in 5 more deaths.
Yes. And, I will make the point that Iranians want the world to know. I've been in touch with Iranians on the ground in all parts of Iran for the past 4 days. As they have come out into the streets, the protests have become much more violent and brazen. The chants on the street that are heard is death to the supreme leader, death to the President Raisi. And it's no longer about bread. I mean, that may have been the catalyst, or what brings people out onto the streets. But now it is about the regime in its entirety, and they're calling for an end to this regime. They know that if the regime gets money, whether it's from the Iran nuclear deal or from oil sales, they will not put it back into subsidies or to help with the price of bread. They will use it to buy terror equipment and weapons and to support the war in Syria and Iraq and Lebanon and Gaza and elsewhere, and they will not use it to support the people of Iran. So their grievances are much more macro than micro at this point. They are still coming out onto the streets. And the biggest Achilles heel of this government is the people, because they know that is how they came into power over 42 years ago, when the people toppled the Shah of Iran and brought this government into power. So they want those protesters off the street, and they will do whatever it takes. So they are getting the Basiji, they're getting the anti-riot forces out there. They're shooting at the protesters. They are dispersing tear gas. They will do whatever it takes. And of course, that death toll, unfortunately, will rise, because they will do whatever it takes to get these protesters off the streets. But I encourage the media to follow the story, to follow their plight. And more importantly than anything else, it's because the international community is currently at the negotiating table begging for a deal with the Iran regime that will normalize relations, that will take the pressure off the Iran regime, that will give them billions of dollars to put into terror and into killing people on the street, these protesters, peaceful protesters on the street. So it's really a wake-up call to the West, to the European Union, to the United States that's jonesing for a deal, that this is the regime that we're dealing with. Let the people of Iran tell us the truth about their government, and let us not go back to that negotiating table without making some preconditions, without asking for all the Western hostages that are being held there to be released, without asking for a change in their behavior and change in how they treat their people and the human rights abuses there, and to really think about how we're going forward with Iran's regime without asking for any of these preconditions.
Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas vowed his government will continue to fund terrorists and their families in what is known in Israel as pay for slay?
Yes, this is the Palestinian way of making sure there will always be a generation of suicide bombers when they pay the families of those who give up their lives in order to kill Jews. Now, think about somebody who is in a very desperate situation financially, and they cannot afford to feed their families. Well, that's a great way of making sure your family is taken care of, because the monthly payout is astronomical if you compare it to the average income in that area. it's horrific what's going on over there in the West Bank, in Gaza, whether it's Hamas and now the Palestinian Authority under Mahmoud Abbas, no different. They're calling for terrorism. They're calling for jihad. The funeral of the Al Jazeera reporter that was completely hijacked, both by the Palestinians and by the media, should be corrected. The clips that are being circulated only show the second part of the story, in which the Israeli police were going after these the people who were holding up the coffin. Well, why were they going after the people who were holding up the coffin? Because they stole the coffin from the family, and the Israeli authorities had worked it out with the family of the reporter to make sure that her funeral procession goes smoothly, that it is in the family's possession. The coffin is not hijacked the way that they attempted to. They wanted to politicize this funeral. They wanted to be a PR spectacle, and it was, in fact. And that is exactly what's going on. You have, actors and actresses. You have, Instagram celebrities calling for, an end to the Israeli state and end to apartheid. And Biden is calling for an investigation without looking at both sides of the story, without looking at what happened there. And really, what's most important is that the people of both the Palestinian people that are under this government and under this leadership that does not want the best for them, when you're paying for them to kill themselves rather than paying for there to be better schools, better jobs, better infrastructure, there is a problem there. It is not about Israel. It's not apartheid. These are the things that the media is completely missing, and therefore really fueling this fire that will continue from biblical times into eternity because of this propaganda and because of the fact that Hamas, the PA, they need to call for a ceasefire. They need to call for peace. They need to change their narrative in schools where the children are learning more about killing Jews than they are about arithmetic and reading. And it will never change unless this narrative is changed.
Foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us today from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.